Good afternoon and welcome to this seminar today that we're holding as part of Compassion and Choices Staying Stronger Together webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Becoming a Powerful Virtual Advocate. How can your online presence inspire action? This is part two of a two-part seminar that we are offering now that everyone has moved from advocacy in the halls of state legislatures to being online all the time. We thought we would offer you a set of tools for how you can make the most of your online presence to advocate for expanding access and improving end-of-life care. Next slide, please. Just so you know, we have an upcoming webinar in our Staying Stronger Together webinar series, and it is on Thursday, June 25th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a really exciting webinar called Ask Me Anything. It's a conversation with Compassion and Choices end-of-life consultants. I'm really looking forward to this webinar so that we can really get the questions that we have about end-of-life care and end-of-life planning out there and answered by some of our experts. Next slide, please. Compassion and Choices works to educate people, empower them, and advocate for changes to improve end-of-life care for everyone. Next slide, please. And I just want to let folks know a few housekeeping items. This call is being recorded for viewing later. We'll be taking questions during the call. There's a Q&A window on your screen at the bottom right. If you have a question for the speakers today, please type your question in there and we'll be stopping periodically to answer questions. After the call, you're going to receive an email with this presentation, the slides from this presentation, and a social media toolbox along with the recording from part one. So look out for that email so that you can start putting these tools to use. I am really pleased to be joined again today by Tom Mara, who is the managing partner at Kivit, a public relations firm that we worked with at Compassion and Choices. We worked with his firm in New Jersey to pass New Jersey's Medical Aid and Dying for the Terminally Ill Act. And we also work with him in New York. So Tom led our part one training, and I'm gonna turn it over to his capable hands to do part two for us. Tom?
Thank you, Corinne. I appreciate it. As Corinne mentioned, my name is Tom Mara, and I am a managing director at Kivit, which is a public affairs firm that runs a variety of communications campaigns throughout the country with a real focus on digital advocacy, social media advertising, and really using social media in a way to advocate for issues such as medical aid and dying, but also educate people about issues like end-of-life options. And so today, the presentation is really going to focus on how to use different social media tools to accomplish those goals. And specifically, we want to talk about how you can optimize content on social media to make it as shareable as possible for the different platforms that you can use. And when I say platform, I really just mean a social media tool. So a platform could be Twitter, it could be Instagram, or it could be Facebook. And we're going to be talking about how content really functions on each one of those platforms and what type of content resonates the most on each one of those as well. Later on, we're going to talk about a way to increase the number of people that follow you on your social media platforms as well. Because once you create one and you start sharing content, you want to make sure that as many people are seeing it as possible so you can communicate your message to the greatest number of folks. We're also going to do an overview of Instagram, kind of a 101 brief description of what Instagram is, what people currently use it for, and what you can use it for to advocate for medical aid and dying. And lastly, the presentation will mention YouTube and TikTok, which are other social media platforms, but we're not going to do a deep dive on it. That will be for a 3.0 digital strategy training session. It won't be in this 2.0, but since they were going to be mentioned, I figured I would mention them at the top of the screen, at the top of the presentation. And as Corinne mentioned, there is going to be periodic pauses for questions. Feel free to ask any question you like, and I'll do my best to try to answer them. And I just want to thank you for joining this part 2 webinar. I hope a lot of folks listened to the part 1 webinar and were excited and decided to come back and learn a little bit more about the social media platforms we can use to advocate and educate people. And if you listened to the part 1, hopefully you created a Twitter account. And if you did, I'm just going to ask you to open it and have it ready on your phone or on your computer, because there's going to be a part of the presentation where we actually ask you to use the Twitter account that you hopefully created. And then before we kind of got into the ins and outs of different tools you can use to educate and advocate using social media, we want to give you a sense of why it's so important. Corinne mentioned that Kivit, the firm that I work for, was active in their New Jersey social media campaign, their New Jersey campaign effort to pass medical aid in dying there. And we were active, and social media, in my view, was a huge part of that effort. And I think this timeline kind of proves that. So medical aid in dying legislation was introduced in New Jersey in 2012. It wasn't until 2018 where there was a real sustained, relentless social media campaign to pass medical aid in dying. And we really used social media in that campaign to educate people about what medical aid in dying is and how it could impact so many people throughout the state of New Jersey. That campaign started in dribs and drabs in 2018, but was really a sustained effort in early January 2019. And then in February, the bill was passed out of the Senate Health, Human Services, and Senior Citizens Committee, which is a big move, which was a big moment for the campaign. After it got out of that committee, it became very likely that the full legislature would actually vote on it. And only a month after the committee voted it out of their committee, the full legislature passed it in March. And social media was a really big part of that effort. And just to give you an example of the types of posts that we would create, if you see it in the middle of this slide, we really focused on telling the stories of people that were terminally ill, and how having this legislation passed would positively impact their lives. And after we started posting about these 3 women, it really started to resonate with people. And a lot of people throughout New Jersey started sharing these stories that we were posting on Compassion and Choices social media handles. And after the general public started to take hold of these 3 stories, newspapers started to also write about them. This newspaper story here was actually an opinion editor at the Star Ledger, who had his own personal story about how his sister was terminally ill at one point and wanted this legislation, but it wasn't legal at the point when his sister was terminally ill. And he became kind of an advocate for the legislation as well after hearing some of the stories that we shared on Compassion and Choices social media platforms. And it just started to grow. And legislators that were opposed or weren't sure about whether they'd be supportive or not started to actually support and co-sponsor the legislation. And it just started to really gain momentum. And then, as I mentioned before, it finally passed, and it passed in March of 2019, and the governor signed it in April of 2019. But social media was really a critical tool to not only educate people about what medical aid in dying legislation was and what it meant for people, because there's so many misnomers about it, or there's so much miseducation about it, but it was also used as an advocacy tool to really urge lawmakers to be courageous and pass this piece of legislation because there was so much support for it in the state. But we were able to really show that through social media. And that's kind of the major question here is, when you share a post, how far does it reach? How many people see it? So when we posted a story about the terminally ill folks that we mentioned previously, how many people actually get to see it? And the answer to that question really varies. It depends. It depends on what hashtag you include in your post. It depends on how many people retweet or share your post. So right now, we're going to ask you to do a little exercise. Within the chat box of Zoom, there's going to be a link. And that link is going to be to a Twitter post that is already existing and on Twitter. But we're going to ask everybody that has a Twitter account to click on that link and retweet it. And if you're a little bit more of a savvy Twitter user, we're going to ask you to retweet it with a comment and just put a hashtag aid in dying. And what we're going to do on the back end is measure how many people shared this post before this Zoom session, and how many people shared this post after this Zoom session, and how many people it reached because all the people that are going to participate decided to share this post with the people that are within their network. And the exercise is really just to demonstrate that, depending on how many people are on this call, how powerful just 1, 2, maybe 10 or 20 retweets can be on an individual post, and how many people can be reached using tools like Twitter and other social media accounts. So that's really the goal. So I'm just going to pause here for about 10 seconds, let people get to that link and actually retweet it. And that's the great thing about social media. You have the ability to share things that you believe in with a network that's far beyond that you could reach by just talking to people on a daily basis. On a daily basis, for instance, I talk to usually 10 people. Obviously today there's a lot more, but usually it's about 10 people. On social media though, thousands of people follow me. So every time I have the ability to share content or post something original, thousands of people are able to see it. You also have that power. And what we're going to urge you to do is use it. So one thing that you can do to ensure that you're doing everything you can to advocate for medical aid in dying and educate people about what it's all about is follow Compassionate Choices on Facebook and Twitter. By following those two accounts, you will be able to see educational posts, advocacy posts about medical aid in dying, and share it with your network of people that follow you. But also explore other content that is on social media regarding the issue. And there's several ways to do that. Almost every social media platform, from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram, has the ability to search for terms. So searching things like aid in dying or medical aid in dying or different hashtags associated with those terms will bring you to pages and people that post about that issue. So we encourage you to follow those folks, read what they're posting and see if it's within your value set, and share it with people to help educate your own network about the issue. Compassionate Choices also often posts news articles about medical aid in dying. That's a great resource for people to really dig into the nuts and bolts or kind of the weeds of medical aid in dying. So we encourage you to share those articles as well. Not every article is good about medical aid in dying, but I would say that if Compassionate Choices accounts are sharing it, it should be good to share. And just generally retweet content you support. And check your email after this session, because there's going to be a toolkit about what you can post online, how to post on Twitter and Facebook, and different things that you can post on Instagram as well. So I know that was only the first 10 slides, but there was a lot mentioned. So I figured we would kind of pause there and give people the opportunity to ask questions before we get deeper into some of the content, the content sharing options, as well as the one-on-one on Instagram.
Great, thank you, Tom. Amanda, do we have any questions at this point?
I do not see any questions at the moment. Just reminding folks, if you do have a question, you can type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and it'll automatically pop up.
And just a note, Tom, I was checking the Twitter and people are actually retweeting. So that's exciting.
That's awesome. That's great.
All right, Amanda, if there's no questions here. Oh, somebody asked.
We're getting questions. Great, this is great. What was the hashtag we were supposed to tweet? What's the
hashtag? It was on the slide. I might have done it a little too fast, but it's hashtag aid in dying.
So another great question, if someone doesn't use their Twitter often, how do people see their retweets?
So if you don't use your Twitter often, it's likely that a lot of people don't follow you, so people won't see it as much, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't share it, because a lot of elected officials that see a tweet that might mention their name will look at how many people are retweeting that specific tweet. So say if we were thanking a legislator for supporting medical aid in dying, that legislator might look to see, well, how many people actually care about this issue? And if 10 people retweet it versus 50, it's a big difference to that legislator. And the same thing on the opposite side. We might be urging specific legislators to support medical aid in dying, and that legislator is likely to look to see in that post, if it's urging them to support the issue, how many people are actually engaging with that post. So even if you don't have a big following, even if you don't use Twitter or Facebook that much, it still makes sense to have one, to use it as an advocacy tool for issues that you're really passionate about, for issues that you really care about.
And last question, can one share articles from local newspapers as well as from their web? It says their web, I'm imagining websites.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say two things on that. I've seen a lot of people recently starting to take pictures of articles and linking them and linking the picture to their Twitter or Facebook account. Kind of older school. I usually link articles that I post, but I've seen people for specifically their local papers take pictures of the actual article and put it online. It's not something I necessarily recommend, but certainly something that you can do. But most even local papers these days definitely have an online presence that links to the articles that they post that I would definitely encourage using. I would say more now than ever, people are relying on their local news sources rather than national news sources because of, for lack of a better word, biases that are there. So there's a lot more trust in your local news source amongst people than I think previously. So I think anything regarding medical aid in dying that's happening in your local paper that's supportive of it, you should definitely consider sharing.
Tom, I actually, just to add to that, I'm always surprised at how many of these tiny papers don't have an online presence, and people cut out the article and mail them to me. And if they're on this call and they're on Twitter, taking just a little picture with your phone and then tweeting it and tagging me or tagging Compassion and Choices can really make that news story go far. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, and just to add to it, Compassion and Choices has thousands of followers, right? So just tagging them and giving them the opportunity to share it with their thousands of followers is a big deal. And it shows supporters that, you know, are already supportive of the issue, that there are other people out there that are also supportive, that there's news being written about it. And it just kind of, it keeps that organizing grassroots movement going. So yeah, don't feel like just because you don't have a lot of followers that you can't post, because the more you post, the more followers you'll have.
So Tom, we got a couple additional questions that I think you can answer quickly.
Sorry, I'm going long, Amanda. I'm sorry, I'll try to be quicker.
It's okay. So Twitter has hashtag medical aid in dying as a popular hashtag, but hashtag just aid in dying doesn't appear as a common option. What would you prefer, hashtag medical aid in dying or hashtag aid in dying?
I mean, I think it depends on the post. So on Twitter specifically, there's a number of characters that you're limited by. So a lot of times we do tend to use aid in dying, so you can fit within your word limit. But I think medical aid in dying is just as strong. I'd have to look at the numbers to see which one is used more, or which network is more connected to aid in dying versus medical aid in dying. But I believe aid in dying has a larger following, so I would use that one.
Great. And the last one that I think you should answer now is, do you risk a copyright infringement if you take a picture of an article and post it?
Sorry, can you say, if you take a picture of an article and post it, do you risk a copyright infringement? No, I mean, I would give the author, the reporter credit, or maybe the outlet credit, just because it's kind of common practice. But no, you don't have to. It's not required, and I think they'll feel good about someone sharing the article that they wrote. It's not something that they would believe you're taking and owning as your own, right? Because even if you take a picture of the article, likely the author's name is going to be within that picture. So it's not something I would be concerned about. Most reporters are going to feel happy that people are sharing their work. And I can confirm hashtag aid in dying has a larger following than hashtag medical aid in dying.
All right, if you want to move on, that's great.
Cool. So as I said before, I wanted to talk just briefly about the type of content you post to different types of social media platforms. So a lot of the time people get concerned about what you're supposed to post on different types of different platforms, and that leads them not to post. But in the reality, it's very simple. On Facebook, people are really looking for videos or photos. So that's the most common thing that's posted on Facebook. And if you use a photo or you use a video within one of your posts for Facebook, it's more likely that people will see it, because a complicated thing called an algorithm boosts posts that have pictures or videos rather than posts that don't. Algorithm, you don't need to know what an algorithm is other than that. If you include a video or if you include a picture, it's more likely that more people are going to see it. That's for Facebook. Twitter, images are definitely preferred, but it's also the place where hashtags are really used more than anything else, and tags as well. And hashtag, like what we mentioned before, aid in dying, just connects you to a broader universe of people than are currently following you. So even if you only had 10 followers on Twitter currently, but hashtag aid in dying had thousands of people following it. If your post mentions hashtag aid in dying, you're no longer just speaking to the 10 people that follow you, you're speaking to the thousands of people that are following that hashtag. And that's really the power of Twitter and the power of a hashtag. It gives you a voice to a greater number of people than you would if you were just posting on your own account without the hashtag. Instagram, unsurprisingly, it's all about photos. It's all about images. That's really the focus. People post videos to Instagram as well, but it's still heavily dominated by photos. YouTube is only videos, but it's longer videos. So on Facebook and Twitter, you're really looking at videos that are mostly below 3 minutes. On YouTube, it prioritizes videos that are longer. A lot of them are actually over even 10 minutes, which in the social media world is unheard of. You really, in social media, you're looking for bite-sized moments for people to share with the people that follow them as well. And then TikTok. TikTok is new. It's relatively new. So this is really a platform for videos that are under a minute long. I would say to date, there isn't as much advocacy on TikTok as there is on other platforms. So people aren't using it as much to advocate for things like medical aid in dying or advocate for different types of legislation. But its influence is growing. And as its influence grows, as the number of people that use it grow, that will certainly change as well. And eventually people will start using it more and more for advocacy related things as well. We're not going to get into YouTube or TikTok that much, but we at least wanted to mention it as a tool, as a social media channel that's out there, that's being used and certainly growing. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about, once you have good content, once you have the proper type of content to post on each one of those platforms, how do you get follows? Well, the number one way that people usually get followers is by following other people. The more people you follow, especially if they have a similar interest to you, the more likely they are going to be to follow you back. So if you post about medical aid in dying frequently, and you go to and you search for people that follow the hashtag aid in dying, and you follow them, and they see that you post about medical aid in dying a lot, they're going to be very likely to follow you, right? Because you share a common interest, you share a common passion. So that's one way, easy way to really start to gain followers, is by following people that have similar interests to you that you post about as well. Another way is turn your offline connections to online connections. So people that you work with, your family, your friends, etc., you can look for them on different social media platforms by searching their names. And if they pop up, you can follow them. And if they know you, they're very likely to follow you back. So those are two really simple ways to gain more followers, gain more influence online, start educating more people about the issues you care deeply about. And then focus your content. And this is a harder tool, but essentially what you're trying to do is ensure that when people go to your page, they have an idea of what you're all about. They have an idea of what you're passionate about, so that when they go to your page, they'll know what type of content you're going to post. So for me, I love New York State politics. When people go to my page, they'll see content about New York State politics. If they're interested in New York State politics, they're likely to follow me. And that's kind of the way I've geared my page. You could do the same thing for medical aid in dying. If you post about why you care about medical aid in dying, if you follow Compassion and Choices and retweet some of the posts that they put out there, people will see that that's an issue that you're passionate about. And if they're passionate about it too, and they see your page, they're going to be likely to follow you. So that's focusing your content. Another great way to do that is to follow people that are going to post about things you care about. So we put up a list here. Don't go crazy trying to copy it down, because you're going to receive this presentation. But these are just a few folks that you can consider following, and organizations. So obviously Compassion and Choices, they have a Twitter handle, an Instagram handle, a Facebook handle, and a TikTok. We would encourage you to follow all of them and share the content that you agree with that they share. Kim Callanan is the president and CEO of Compassion and Choices, also has a Twitter and an Instagram account. We would encourage you to follow her and retweet and post things that they're posting about. And Corinne Carey, who has an active Twitter account, mostly posts about New York and New Jersey, medical aid and dying, I would say, but definitely someone you should consider following as well and resharing and posting about. But outside of just Compassion and Choices, there is a large following of people or influencers that also agree with medical aid and dying that you can consider following. So Atul Gawande and Diane Rem are two options of people that are supportive of medical aid and dying and are definitely kind of like influencers within their field. One is a former radio host and one is a surgeon. He's written 4 books and is a researcher as well. So they are folks that you can follow and figure out what posts that you agree with that you would also want to share. But they'll also, once you follow them, will connect you to people that are within that influencer sphere that might also be supportive of medical aid and dying. So that's also just something to consider. And one thing I would just mention is something critical to our work to get medical aid and dying passed in various jurisdictions is lawmakers, news outlets, advocates, other organizations that are supportive of medical aid and dying. Being connected within that universe of people will just make the things that you post And the things that you post, if they potentially follow you back and share them, it'll just make you connected to a universe of people that have the same value set and have the same goals. So those are just examples of folks you can follow. And once you start to follow them online, once you start using the social media platform for that, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram will automatically highlight and connect you to other people that are like-minded. So they will suggest that you follow other folks that are also supportive of medical aid in dying. And that's just something that kind of happens naturally as your social media accounts grow. So here's a sample post that actually comes from Corinne's account. These are example posts to show you the type of content that you can post on Facebook and ways that you can do it well, but even ways that you can improve upon it. So if you look at the first link, the basic solo link, all you see is that link and a story, but it doesn't really tell you anything, right? There's no context to why you're posting that link and what you feel about the story that's actually in there. It's not saying that that's a bad post. It's just saying that you can improve upon it to show people what you feel about the story that's there. So if you look at the second post, instead of just posting the link, Corinne says, I wear a mask to protect my mother who is immunocompromised due to kidney failure. Who do you wear a mask for? So obviously this is in the context of COVID-19, right? At first, with just posting the article, all it says is mask wearing could prevent COVID-19. Fine, good to know, educational, nothing wrong with it. But here, there's just so much more of a personal connection to what Corinne is asking people to do. It's saying why she wears a mask. And it could resonate with somebody that might have a relative or a friend that might also have a immunodeficiency, right? That they might also want to wear a mask for. So instead of thinking about themselves when they decide or not to wear a mask, they're thinking about a loved one. And just showing the difference, just a couple words, just a little bit of context can have when you're creating your social media posts. Then you can even take it to the next level. Sorry, I skipped around. You can even take it to the next level where you're not only providing context, you're not only linking to an article, but you're also tagging Compassion and Choices, an organization that has a much larger following than Corinne currently has because it represents thousands of people. And that is just a way for you to not only get across your message, not only link to a third party that's kind of validating what you're trying to say, which is wearing a mask helps, but you're also connecting it to a much larger audience because you tagged Compassion and Choices, and that's the tag right there if people can't see it. So post copy is important. Mentioning people are important. If you're not going to mention another organization that has a larger following, like I said before, you can always use a hashtag, and always having a graphic and always having a photo is always going to make your post more likely to be seen by more people, because when you post pictures or you post photos or you post videos, Facebook and all of the social media platforms kind of boost it into more people's feeds. So now we're going to take a pause, and we're actually going to do a poll question for folks. And the poll question is, do you use social media on a weekly basis? We're just going to give everybody a second to answer. And here what we're really trying to do is figure out how many people that are participating in these webinars that clearly have a passion for medical aid and dying are actually using social media weekly, and what's the best way essentially to reach them to ensure that we can share our message with folks. Was that enough time? And now we'll take some questions.
Great. Tommy, what's the difference between a tag and a hashtag on Twitter? How do you know what term to tag and who you should and what you should be hashtagging?
Sure. So tag is simply tagging another account. So like my account is tmara27. If you were to tag me, you would use an @ symbol and then put my name, put my Twitter handle name, which is tmara27, and that would tag my account to your post. A hashtag is more connected to a general issue. So for instance, the hashtag Black Lives Matter is a hashtag that's been using a lot over the past 2 weeks, right? That's connected to an issue, not a specific account. A tag is to a specific account and is used with the @ symbol, whereas the hashtag is the pound symbol, the one with these. That was deeper explained in the 1.0 presentation. So if there's further questions on that, I would encourage folks to go to that link and watch the 1.0 presentation.
Thanks. Another question, how do you reach out of your bubble?
Yes. So what hashtagging is one of the best ways to reach outside of your bubble, because it will connect you to people that you might not know from your friends or your family, et cetera, but believe in the same issues that you believe in. So that's one really good way. And the other thing is you could use hashtags that might not connect to the specific issue that you're advocating for to even connect to that broader universe, right? So you can post about medical aid in dying, but just put up a hashtag that says medical, right? But not medical aid in dying. And that will introduce you to a whole new group of people that might not even have a connection to aid in dying, but just to the medical community. So hashtagging is a really good way. Following different folks that you might not know but agree with the issues that you post about, and hoping that they follow you back is another good way. But hashtagging, I would say, is definitely the #1 way to reach the broadest amount of people in the quickest manner.
Someone said, I know how to follow accounts, but how do you follow hashtags? For example, if I want to follow people who are using the hashtag medical aid in dying, how would you do that?
So you would actually just click on the hashtag that you see on the post, and that will bring up all of the posts about that particular hashtag. Or you could search the hashtag using the search function on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And if you search it, that's another way where all of the posts that use that hashtag will automatically come up. And usually what I do when I'm a fan of a particular hashtag or a particular movement is I'll search the hashtag and then I'll follow a couple people that are using it the most. And that way, not only am I seeing everyone that posts about the hashtag, but I'm also following the people that are using it the most and kind of like the key influencers that are using the hashtag the most.
And who makes up these hashtags? Where do they come from?
It depends. I mean, a lot of the times I would say the best ones are born out of kind of organic movements that happen on the ground and really catch on quickly because there's just a wide group of people that believe in it. Others are more manufactured. Other come from public affairs firms like mine or big organizations that are trying to like push an advertising issue. But they really can come from anywhere. It could be an individual person. It could be someone on this Zoom meeting right now. Really, anyone can create a hashtag. Depending on how big it gets is the other question, right? That is kind of unknown. But anyone can create a hashtag.
So I'm going to ask you 2 more questions. The first is the general rule only one hashtag and tagging one person, or can you do more than one hashtag and tag more than one person in a post?
You can definitely use more than one hashtag, and you can definitely tag more than one person or organization. I think you'd probably want to have a reason for doing that. Like a lot of the times a lot of legislators, for instance, might be tagged in one post because you're thanking all like 5 legislators at once for being supportive of an issue. That would be a reason to tag multiple people in one post because there's multiple legislators that are supportive. For a hashtag, I think if you have room to include a hashtag, there's nothing wrong with including it. They should be linked in some way though. Like you wouldn't want to use 2 hashtags that have absolutely nothing to do with each other in one post. So I can't think of an example offhand, but you can use multiple hashtags. I would probably ensure that they're somewhat connected though.
Got it. I just want a quick mention. I know we talked a little bit about Atul Gawande. Just to be clear, he has not taken a position on medical aid in dying. He's been very vocal in the end of life care arena and is certainly supportive of that. But we want to make sure that we don't quote that he's supportive of medical aid in dying because there's nothing pointing to that at this point. So I just wanted to clarify that. Then the last question I'm going to ask during this segment is, what if someone tags, Compassionate Choices or maybe even an individual person with an article that they might not agree with? Are you able to screen who tags you and things?
So no, people are able to tag you on things that you might not necessarily agree with. But you could mention if they do that you disagree with the content of the article, but they are able to tag you in it. You could make your account private, which will disable their ability to do that. But that will also disable your ability to communicate with the largest number of people. Once your account is private, only people that you approve following you will be able to follow your account, which does have some benefits to it, but definitely will dissuade certain folks from trying to follow your account. So, I keep my account open. I've never had an issue like that. And the majority of folks that I speak to have never really had an issue with that either.
Great. And okay, I'm going to ask one more anyways. Videos between 3 and 10 minutes. We talked about TikTok being good and YouTube, but what about videos that might fall in that category?
No, that's a good question. I believe those are more for YouTube than anything else. The Facebook and Twitter posts that you'll see mostly have videos that are below 3 minutes, and actually people are trying to get it even lower than that. The reality is, after 15 seconds of a video, people kind of tune out and try to go to the next thing because social media, the feed it's just so quick and easy to scroll through that you have to capture their attention in that small time frame. So I would say if you're going to be over 3 minutes, YouTube is probably where you want to be. And if you're posting on Facebook or Twitter, you want your video to be as short as possible while maintaining your core message.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we're on to Instagram 101. So as I said before, the platform is really driven by visual content. The less text, the less copy that you can have on the top of your post, the better. And the better photo that you can add to your actual post, the better it's going to perform. On Instagram, it's not as much as Facebook is about your existing network. So Facebook and even Twitter is more about the people that you know, your friends, your family, etc. I would say on Instagram, it's more about what you want to learn about, what you want to know about, is how people connect on Instagram rather than some of the other social media platforms that we mentioned before. It's also a very influencer heavy platform. So the people that drive the content on Instagram are a lot of celebrities and sports folks. They get the most interactions and the most engagements on Instagram. But that shouldn't scare you away from using it. It's just something to note. And I think that really drives the audience on Instagram more than anything else. So Instagram is known as the platform from a social media perspective to reach people that are younger than 30. Facebook is really driven towards people that are over 50. And Twitter, it's not as much about age, and it's more about being a stakeholder. So influencer wise, Instagram is driven by influencers, but that also drives the audience, which is much younger profile. And people are actually more known on Instagram by their handle rather than their actual name. So like my handle would be tmara27, which is easier to search on Instagram than my actual name. Same thing for like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. People know her by her full name now, but when she was just starting out, they really knew her by AOC. And that is an Instagram thing as well, where people are more known by their handle than their actual name. And there are three modes of content on Instagram. There are things that show up on your feed. So posts that show up on your feed, which means they stay there forever or until you delete them. There are items that you can post to your story, which are things that usually only stay there for 24 hours and then come down. And then there is Instagram TV, which is still relatively new and is really for longer forms of content. I think it's a way for them to try to compete with YouTube with longer form videos that mostly people now post on YouTube. So I think that's just like a competitive thing within different social media platforms. But it's not something that's used by everyday users of Instagram, really. Everyday users of Instagram usually post to their story or usually post to their feed. And similar to Facebook and Twitter, it's very easy to sign up for. All you really need is your phone or email, name, user. You have to create your own username or handle and password. And there are people, this question comes up a lot, like, can I use different Instagram accounts for different purposes? So could you have a personal one and a business one, an advocacy one and one for your dog? Yes, the answer is yes to all of those questions. A lot of people have multiple Instagram accounts and use it for different purposes. And the way to really navigate or grow your Instagram account is to do what you normally do on some of your other social media accounts, but just focus a little bit more on photos than you do on your other accounts. So post original content, share other people's posts if you agree with them, use hashtags, tag other accounts as well. This is a tactic that's normally used on Twitter, but is definitely also effective on Instagram. And really use the the Explore page. That will give you the ability to look for folks that agree with the issues that you want to post about on Instagram the most. So you could search things like Aid in Dying on Instagram to find folks that post about that issue the most. And like I said before, when we posted stories about the folks, the terminally ill folks in New Jersey, we actually didn't get a huge amount of feedback on Instagram. We didn't get a huge amount of engagement. And we actually think that's because the age of the people on Instagram. So it's a much younger audience that needs to be educated about Aid in Dying. And that's why it's actually important for us to focus on Instagram more than maybe some of the other social media platforms. It's pretty clear that right now on Instagram, there's less support for the issue. And like I said before, we think that's because of the age. So getting on Instagram, educating younger folks about medical aid in dying and end-of-life options is important because it reaches an audience that, at least right now, it doesn't seem is as supportive or maybe is not thinking about medical aid in dying because of their age. I just can't see it right now. So As said before, this is a sample of a Instagram post, very simple, good picture, has a very clear message. You can upload a video or photo very easily. You can choose a filter. So the cool thing about Instagram is you can take a photo, you can change it to black and white, you can make it brighter or less bright. And there's just a bunch of different ways that you can post photos here to make them interesting. Um, when you post, there's always an option to add your location. So you could say you're at the state capitol, or you're in a specific senator's office. That's always an option that pops up when you post. Always write good copy to accompany the picture that you're posting about. This isn't dissimilar from Facebook or Twitter, but I would always keep your Instagram copy a little bit shorter than your Facebook or Twitter copy. But you use hashtags in the same way as you do Twitter or Facebook, and you tag different accounts the same way you would Twitter or Facebook. The main difference here is, at least right now, you're just reaching a much younger audience of people. And these are just example posts from Compassion and Choices Instagram account to give you a sense of what you could share if you follow Compassion and Choices. So there are a lot of different images, whether they be of actual people or infographics, that are constantly coming through on Compassion and Choices feeds that you can share if you don't feel comfortable sharing your own posts and your own content. And the last thing on Instagram that I would bring up is there is a thought that on Instagram it's harder to share articles or links. And that was definitely true in the past, but there is a link in bio application. It's an app that you could get on the App Store, that if you purchase it, I think it's free actually. If you download the application, you're able to post links on Instagram very easily, and they show up in a very user-friendly way. So this is a post example using a link on Instagram, using link in bio. It just kind of shows how it appears and shows that it's easy to click on and go to the page that you're trying to drive them to. But they just kind of have many people think that you can't post links on Instagram well, and it's just not true anymore as long as you use link in bio. And I'll pause here for questions.
Great, thanks so much, Tammy. Is hashtagging #DeathCafe okay for CNC volunteers to use?
Sorry, what was it?
Is it appropriate to hashtag #DeathCafe if you're a CNC volunteer?
I don't know the hashtag #DeathCafe or what it's associated with. I'd have to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, you should hashtag anyone you want to see the post. And death cafes exist all over the country. They often are not wanting to engage with us directly in some areas, but making them aware of events or activities that you're doing as a volunteer is perfectly fine. Making the Death Cafe aware of advances in the end-of-life care movement is also totally appropriate. And Tom, maybe you could address hashtagging in general. You should and hashtag other groups and people that you want to see these posts, right? So you want to legislative leaders, for example, or you want to hashtag another kind of movement that people see, right?
Yeah, so I would say hashtags you can use very liberally. Any group or organization that's pushing something specific that you think might relate or be supportive of medical aid in dying, you should feel comfortable using. And tagging, certainly your legislative leaders, certainly people that you're trying to influence and support medical aid in dying are the folks that you should tag.
Great, thank you. Is capitalization significant and or important?
No. Not when you're trying to tag or not when you're trying to hashtag. People might use it in a specific way, but you don't have to capitalize it in the same way and it will still pop.
And if people don't have link in bio downloaded, what do they see when you post?
It's usually, so the way they do it on Instagram now is it shows up clean, like it will almost have a pre-formatted image for each one of the posts. I believe if you do it without that, it's just it's a big URL, which you want to try to avoid. So on Twitter, for instance, they have bit.ly, which I don't think we need to get into now. But the best way to do it if you're using a link on Instagram is to definitely do link in bio. I think if you're not using that, I would not try to link on Instagram.
This question, I'm not sure, maybe you'll have a thought on an answer, but how effective are anonymous posts?
When you, I guess I would say what do you mean by an anonymous post? Because at the end of the day, your account needs to be connected to something in order for you to actually sign up. There has to be some type of name, etc. So if it literally is just anonymous with a blank picture, you're going to be much less likely to get significant engagement because folks aren't going to know what you're about. The best pages that are created have photos associated with it, have your name, have a description of what's important to you within the page, and as I said before, has content that's relevant to the issues that you talk about the most or are passionate about. So if it's just like a random account posting about a random thing as a one-off, it's going to be much likely to gain any significant traction.
Great. And how do you get link in bio?
It's just, it's same as a regular app. You go to the App Store on your smartphone and type in link in bio, and we'll send this presentation around so people can copy it down and you can get it.
Fantastic. Are there old school, like non-social media related methods that we could use to disseminate information?
Yes, you could try to place articles or opinion pieces in your local paper. You probably could work with a lot of the folks at CNC to figure out, where might be the best place to place an opinion piece, for instance, that you can write, and I'm sure some of the folks at CNC can help you actually get placed. But I've seen that be a really effective way for people to kind of share their story that has nothing to do with social media and more to do with traditional earned media, what we call earned media, but essentially just means newspapers.
I think I would also add, Tom, that, we've had supporters hold house parties. It's kind of difficult during this particular pandemic, but having house parties, sending an email to your list, if you've got family and friends on an email distribution list that you use for important family announcements, you could send around information about initiatives from Compassionate Choices and get people to take action that way. There are plenty of ways to get involved that are non-social media related.
Yeah, I would just add too, one of the things that sometimes folks do, if you don't use social media, but you email, you can always email articles to lawmakers and say, I saw this really great article, you should check it out. You could mail them a copy of an article if it's lawmakers that you're trying to reach. So there's always ways to stay engaged. Last question that I have at the moment, can you clarify a little bit about how to share a post that someone likes on Instagram?
Say that again. How to share a post that someone likes on Instagram?
Yeah, so if I like something on Instagram, can I share it? Like you can share on Facebook. And so how do you do that?
There's a button. I'm trying to see if one of our posts actually has the button, but I think we cut them off of all of them. There is a button that we can include in the social media in the social media toolkit that we send around that will show you how to share a post on Instagram. I just don't have a picture of that button on any of our slides, but we can show you
What does
that.
the button look like?
Sorry?
What does the button look like?
It looks very similar to the ones that are on Twitter. I'm trying to get I think I could actually share it in a second. Oh, you have it? Okay.
Trying to figure out if there's a button there that people can see.
It's there. It's the paper airplane. See that?
Yeah, it's the paper airplane. Oh, look at that. You can actually share. I don't know if people can see that. They can't really. But you can share that post to your story. And I never knew that. So thank you.
And that will stay up for 24 hours, I think.
I see. Okay. Thanks, Tom. Great. Amanda, do we have any more questions?
More just a comment. Someone also mentioned if you have a neighborhood listserv, if you wanted to share an article and you thought your neighborhood listserv would be open to that, that's another way to share.
Great. I think that's it, Tom. You can go ahead.
Actually, I think this actually comes back to you, Corinne.
You are right. Well, thanks for all of you who've stuck in there with us this far. I just want to duck in here and say that there are some best practices that we also want to share with you when using social media. First of all, I don't know, you may have heard these terms calling out versus calling in. You may actually see some things on social media or in the media that you want to share that you don't like. And what you want to try to do there is not call someone out for bad behavior or for saying something that you find objectionable. You want to educate. So sort of taking, you'll see this quote down a little bit further, when they go low, we go high. That's a quote, as you know, from former First Lady Michelle Obama. And that's really what we want to do at Compassion and Choices. If you're seeing something that you don't like, call them in instead of calling them out. So instead of shaming them on social media, use that as an opportunity to educate. Because remember, you're not talking just to the person that is saying something that you're offended by. You're talking to everyone who is seeing that on social media. So that's why it's really important. The next point is just keep it civil. Things devolve very easily on social media into swearing and name calling and blaming, and the message really gets lost in that fight, and you find that people dig in and hold on to their contrary positions. And we don't want that among our supporters. We really want to keep these campaigns based in compassion, and a way to do that is to call people in for what they're saying, to educate them, to bring them into the movement instead of shaming them and calling them out. So next slide, please. Oh, Tom, next slide, if you're still there. Okay, great. The other is, we've got some best practices with regard to language. You are going to see physician-assisted suicide in newspaper articles. You're going to see it in social media posts. And some people will say, look, I'm totally in favor of suicide. I'm totally in favor of physician-assisted suicide. And that's why I'm going to call it that. You don't have to call it that. And we encourage you to use the phrases medical aid in dying. Those are the titles of the bills. That is the name of the practice. It's sort of the most neutral way of talking about it, as well as end-of-life options. So if you're reposting, retweeting, sharing something on social media that has those words in the title, when you post it, use the correct terminology, medical aid in dying or end-of-life options. I would also encourage you to reach out to your local Compassion and Choices affiliate for further information. If you've got a contact in campaign staff or in staff that's working on access in your state, reach out to them, because we have an incredible number of materials on messaging and best practices that we can share with you if you want to hone your skills on how to talk about this issue. Next slide, please. Well, I think, Amanda, do we have any other questions? It feels like we really answered a lot.
We don't have any other questions.
Great. So next slide. Now is the time we're going to ask you another question. So after listening to this presentation, do you think you'd be more likely to use social media to advocate for medical aid in dying and expanding end-of-life choices in your state? I'll give you a second to fill that out. You can say yes, no, you might be unsure at this point, or you might need more information. And folks, do we have the results of those polls that we can share with people listening, or do we have to wait for those?
Yes, I can share them momentarily.
Great. I think we can go to the next slide while we wait for that. So just, you probably know this, but Compassion and Choices is funded almost exclusively by individual donors like you. If you enjoyed this presentation, I hope you'll consider making a donation, a small donation or a very large donation today. Just go to compassionandchoices.org, donate. /donate. So just so you know, of the people that joined us on the call, 65% of you use social media on a weekly basis and 33% of you do not. So I guess we are hoping to get the 33% of you up to using social media at least on a weekly basis. And then lastly, 64% of you are saying that you are more likely to use social media to advocate on these issues in the future, and 12% of you need more training, which is a great time for me to say that if you are interested in, Tom kind of hinted that we'll do a 3.0 or a part 3 of this training, please let us know. You know, you can respond to one of our emails, you can reach out to a CNC staff member, and we'll arrange for further training. I know I got a lot out of this. I want to thank all of you for joining us, and really a huge thanks to Tom Mara of Kivit for presenting this training. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.